Please be seated. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 19th meeting of City Council, the last meeting before the end of the year and Christmas. Before we get to our formal agenda, just wanted to point out that, of course, members of council were at the event today. We had a media conference at the wastewater treatment plant this morning, and at that meeting we talked about the substantial completion of the wastewater treatment plant, and that through a savings on the contingency budget, we saved an additional $6 million. The report is simply to say that we are on time and under budget. A good news story for taxpayers. We have a very modern wastewater treatment plant that is able to meet our capacity for growth for the next 30 years. And we are, more importantly, ensuring that our environmental footprint downstream is mitigated by a more stringent standards than we had before. So all very, very good news. I do want to mention a couple of staff, though, that were involved with this plant. If I can find my notes here. Rob Court, Jerry Chesick, Jane Kruger, Simon Baker, and Gary Mack, among others, who were instrumental in ensuring that this project became on time and on budget. I think we should give our staff a great round of applause for the work they did. Not to mention EPCOR and the other contractors as well that made that possible. So a good way to start a Monday morning. Great. On that, I would like a confirmation of the agenda, please. Someone can move that. Councillor Hawkins, seconder, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We look at the adoption of the minutes. Councillor Young.
Your Worship, we have some business arising from these minutes, and I would like to read the addition to you. Whereas at the November 28th, 2016 meeting of City Council, report number CR 1630 respecting the 2017 elected official committee appointments was considered, and whereas not all appointments were made to the Finance and Administration Committee, therefore be it resolved that Councillor Sharon Bryce be appointed to the Finance and Administration Committee effective January 1st, 2017 to December 31st, 2017.
Okay. A second for that motion, please. Yeah. Councillor Fredera. So we're adding Councillor Bryce to the Finance and Administration Committee. I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes as amended. Motion to adopt those. Councillor Young, you move those. Seconder for that, please. Councillor Bresciani. Any errors, omissions, or comments on the minutes beyond what we just did? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move to our first delegation, Communications, Public Bylaws, and Related Reports, D16-117. Councillor Bresciani.
Your Worship, if I may, with respect to this item, I have an immediate family member that has put a hold on a piece of property located in the towns. Therefore, to avoid any potential conflict of interest, I will recuse myself.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bresciani. Wait till she leaves the room. We'll also be sending you out with a bylaw that comes later on as well, so that'll be a bit later in the meeting. So I could have Doug Rogers come forward, please. Mr. Rogers, you've been here before. You know the process. You identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and maybe questions afterwards.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Doug Rogers. I'm the development manager for the town subdivision located in Southeast Regina. I'm here today to provide information and seek approval from this council for a zoning amendment put forward. The town's concept plan in the zoning for the first 3 stages were approved by this council in April of this year. Those 3 stages contained 196 single-family lots and a 3.7-acre condo site. We can advise you that the single-family housing market and the housing business is alive, active, and very well in Saskatchewan, in Regina, because since that time we've sold 178 of those lots, of which we have deposits and signed option agreements, and we also have an option agreement and deposit on the condo site. This leaves us right now with only 18 lots in our current inventory, and to maintain and increase our number of lots available for next year, we're seeking approval for our Stage 1D lots consisting of 173 lots. And interesting to note, we don't have our final pricing yet. We're working with our consultants. We'll probably have that early in January. We've already got a lineup of builders wanting an additional 50 lots. And that's interesting through all of this. With all the sales on these lots, we won't have all our streets, services, and everything completed until probably Labor Day of 2017. And the majority of the lots we sold last year, we still, because of the late start, we don't have all the streets, sidewalks, sewer and water, all around gas, electricity, all that in. So it's the housing market is still robust out there. The approval of this latest stage into the towns will give us a gateway entrance into the towns. Presently, the only direct entrance is via Arcola Avenue and Chuka Boulevard. This new entrance via Buckingham will provide an alternate access to both the east shopping and employment area and to Arcola Avenue. We will be working together with your administration on the widening of Woodland Grove South to provide a suitable access for future residents of the towns. For information, the projected population of the towns in the approved concept plan is 7,200 people, and 44% of the land that we are currently under contract to develop, population would be 3,200. Thank you very much. We look forward to approval of our application, which your administration has recommended, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Are there any questions of the delegation? Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much, Mr. Rogers. Let's talk this through a little bit. You provided some information in your submission here that I thought was interesting. But first of all, let's just talk a little bit about streets. And so you talked about Woodland Grove being expanded going south. Do you see that happening to the north as well?
As development occurs, we would expand Woodland Grove all the way up to Aaron's Road.
Thanks. I want to just ask about the population. Is the population of the 7,000+ that you mentioned for all of the towns from at completion, if you followed the concept plan as it is, all the way from Aurora to the Greens? Is that what you're projecting at 7?
Your Worship, no, it's not actually to Aurora. It's from Woodland Grove east to Tower Road, bordered by Aaron's Road. Okay, south of Aaron's Road.
So, because there's other landowners to the north.
There's other landowners to the east and to the north. Yes.
Good. Thanks very much. Let's just talk about drainage, because this came up at Planning Commission, but it also has come up in this whole area. So when we first heard from Aurora, they had a plan. When we talked about the Greens, they had a plan. Can you give me some assurance that all of this is connected and will drain properly?
Through you, Your Worship, yes. The storm drainage for our area of the towns drains east into a linear detention pond, and that actually extends a bit north up into the 300,000 lands that's not yet to accommodate all of the towns. So all our stormwater will go east to the linear detention and then south.
Good, thanks. Because Council had heard before about that linear. I wanted to identify that. I appreciate that. What we're really approving today is just taking from urban holding to allowing development to occur. And there's a variety of housing type within what is going to be offered. Why are people interested in this area?
Yeah, I think Southeast has always been a very popular area. I mean, Windsor Park immediately to the west was a very popular area. The Greens of Gardner to the south has been a very popular area, and this is a continuation. The shopping district in the east is just a popular area of town.
Thanks. Can you just, as a point of reference, is this walkable to the school?
To the new school?
Yep.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I got gray hair. I don't know how far kids walk anymore and how far they bus, but it is close. Okay. And it's also close to the joint use school in Windsor Park.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for that. That's a good point. Lastly, just again, in terms of reference, is this walkable to Aurora, or is it walkable to the shopping districts in the south, or would this be that middle section that maybe is not quite walkable?
It would be not quite walkable. It depends how ambitious you are. You could walk to Aurora, but it's probably, 3 or 4 kilometers. I haven't
good
about that.
Just point of reference, thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other questions? Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I was wondering if you could walk me through this new development in terms of its compliance with the official community plan's definition of complete communities, as well as the target of 70% greenfield development and 30% infill.
Well, the concept plan does comply with the OCP. There was a period of time where our consultants dealt with the city in ensuring that the concept plan does comply with the OCP. So it's, different housing forms are involved in it. So I can tell you it does. As far as the 70-30, we're part of the greenfield, so I don't know what the 30 would make up of downtown. I don't have. It's not part of our development.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Other questions? Thank you. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now look at report 16-131, which is a report from the Planning Commission, a zoning amendment application for the town's Phase 1, Stage 1D. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. May I have a second? I'll speak to this.
Seconder for the report, please. Councillor Andrew Stevens.
Thank you. So what you have before you is we have lands that are under urban holding. Identify that because that's the designation that's given to an area that is supposed to become housing but isn't ready for it yet. What you have before you now is an approval so that this can become a housing or residential area, or another designation. In this case, it is housing. You'll see that there's a variety of housing type. I appreciate the question that Councillor Stevens asked, and I'm going to respond a little bit. This is the second neighborhood in the city to follow the official community plan. You've heard before about Westera and what that means. This one will have to go through that same scrutiny. Some of the previous areas mentioned out here did not go through that same scrutiny, but this one did. Planning Commission saw this as consistent, saw that, as you heard, when it comes to that linear drainage system and so on, all of these areas are tied together. We see this as a valuable development. Would seek concurrence, please.
Other speakers to the report? On the question, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move on to our next report once Councillor Bershani comes back in. So the next report we're looking at is related to a proposed medical clinic at 2703 Victoria Avenue. Scott Bitts is here. His report is a communication, so he's not making a formal presentation, but he'll ask questions, answer questions. Does anybody have any questions of the submission? I want to speak with Mr. Bitts. It's very clear what he's saying. Can I have a motion to receive and file that communication, please? Councillor Stevens, a seconder, please. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So this is report 132, which is a contract zone application for proposed medical clinic at 2703 Victoria Avenue. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Could I have a second? I'll speak to this, please.
Seconder, please.
So we saw this as a really valuable addition to the neighborhood. I thought Mr. Bitts did a great job at Planning Commission in terms of articulating what it is that they had in mind and so on. And he actually purchased the building with the understanding that the chiropractic services, etc., would fall within the regulation, and it did not, hence why he's applying here before. I want to highlight just a couple of things. One, it's bringing service to the area. It's bringing service to the area that does not exist. We've long talked about the notion of walkability. This is a walkable neighborhood. And so when we looked at, from a planning perspective, we looked at the idea of how much parking. We felt that those had been met. Not only is there the 4 spots that are identified, but there's also a garage that could also alleviate some of the parking, at least from a staff point of view. There is transit that is very, very nearby, and we see this as a really welcome addition, but also a repurpose of a very, very nice building and a very nice location. It would add greatly to the neighborhood. Again, we seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next delegation is also a communication. Larry Seidor. This is with respect to the humanitarian service facility at 1610 Angus Street. To answer questions only, or would you like to address council? Okay, you want to come forward? If you could identify yourself, sir, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
I don't think I'll take that long.
Up to 5 minutes. Go right ahead.
My name is Larry Sidora. I'm not too sure of the formalities here. I'm supposed to say
you can speak on your view on the facility. You give us a written submission. You don't have to follow that.
Okay.
But if you speak to the issue at hand, which is the development on that site, you have 5 minutes for that presentation. Just speak as long as you would like to.
Very good. Just to give you guys an idea of who I am, I have a building at 1620 Albert Street, so basically directly behind Angus, directly behind my building, is where the humanitarian center was proposed or is proposed. And I guess I would have been here at the level before, but somehow or other they missed and gave me a couple hours notice with a late courier. Somehow they missed my email. At any rate, I guess the biggest thing I would like to say is that I don't believe that maybe this is the best place for especially the soup kitchen, and I am very sympathetic to the cause that we need to fulfill and take care of all aspects of society, but that neighborhood I feel is going to be very, very digressed with the soup kitchen aspect, very particularly. In the reports that we've had back and forth, it says there's been studies that say that there shouldn't be congregation around, and that the building is a nice building and it's going to be helping the neighborhood. And I'm kind of going, I'd like to see actual reports done. I don't think we've had anything solid, and I don't know if in your context and work that you guys have done, are we actually taking that into consideration? Property values, the crime. Myself, as I've said in my submission, it just seems to me that the area right behind Broad Street, where the Waterston, Carmichael, Detox, that area is already housing a lot of that stuff. Would we not be better to kind of keep that stuff and surrounding services perhaps in one area rather than spread it to a new area? We don't have other things in that. The residential that's right behind, there was a lot of people at the planning when we went to Souls Harbor question and answer that were very passionate about safety, needle drug use, the congregation of the clientele, and they've been there for 20, 30 years, as have we, the business owners. Rainey, who's here, has his business for sale, which is right next door to that property. My tenant has already said they're not staying. My main tenant, which is Elite Security in my building, says they're not staying if that happens. I guess we'll, again, not trying to sound socially not compassionate, it's kind of shooting us in the foot a little bit, the people that are there, for quality tenants, property values, and I don't know how much goes into that. In the stuff that in the reports keep saying in a couple different places about that won't be happening in our previous studies or whatnot, and I would like to see some of these studies. I don't know where that relationship comes to fact. That's pretty much the majority of my point, I guess, and I would be happy to have any questions or answer period going back and forth if somebody has questions for me.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Evening. Thanks for coming forward. I have two questions for you. One is, have you talked to anybody from Souls Harbor? Have you met with the people that are there?
Absolutely. We went to their presentation that they had a month ago or so.
Good. Okay. Thanks for that.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks for that. What I heard from your comments is that you're looking for some answers to some questions, and I'll try and do that as we go forward here.
Much appreciated.
Are there other questions of the delegation? Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Seidor, for coming this evening.
Absolutely.
I got to admit, I was nervous when I first came here, too, so you're doing better than I am.
Thank you.
I'm dealing with a parallel issue in Heritage with regards to Carmichael Outreach looking for a new space. So I'm very sympathetic to the concerns that you're raising here, and I'm curious, considering that there is a cluster of these existing services in Heritage. Have you talked with the community in that neighborhood to figure out whether or not the threat of decreased property value, crime, the consequences of people mulling around? Do you know if in that area where the Souls Harbor is currently located,
Yes.
if those consequences you fear, does it already exist elsewhere in the city?
Well, I mean, without being socially awkward here or whatever, the inner city, everybody, we know where some of the problem areas are, and I don't have to spell those out, but a soup kitchen, from what experience I've had in other cities and whatnot, it's a focal point. I don't know what else I can say.
Okay, fair enough. And one final question. You had mentioned it, theoretically it belongs somewhere else, perhaps where it's currently located. And let's say, for argument's sake, the building is no longer equipped to service the needs of Souls Harbor and its clients. Where would you put Souls Harbor if not in this proposed location?
Again, I'm not thinking that the rest of that proposal is a bad one. It's the soup kitchen that I really think is the tough hit on the neighborhood. That component of it. I mean, you know what? Like I say, there's going to be maybe it's not everybody's top wish that you're going to have some of these services in areas, but we have to. That's just society. But the soup kitchen, as I say, I think would be better where maybe some of those other services, as I mentioned, are focused. And I don't know if there's a building or land available, or maybe more thought has to be put into that. But again, I can't see it doing good for that neighborhood. The soup kitchen, in contrary to opinion of Souls Harbor, I can't see it doing anything but decreasing the neighborhood and safety of those houses. There's houses directly behind with a lot of children, and that's what we're showing up at that meeting presentation. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stevens. Other questions of the delegation? There are none. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation, Joe Miller. Mr. Miller, if you could identify yourself and tell us who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there are likely questions afterwards.
He's a tall guy. My name is Joe Miller, and I'm the Executive Director for Souls Harbor Rescue Mission, and I'm here to seek approval for our Samaritan project. The Souls Harbor Rescue Mission exists to fill an ongoing need in our community, and for the last 26 years, we haven't seen that need diminish. So today, we faithfully continue to serve the homeless and the hurting each and every day. We started our services in North Central, feeding and caring for the people in this neighborhood. Over the years, as we have grown, we have sought out suitable buildings in which to do the work. For many years now, we have been operating our men's emergency shelter and our meal program out of our 1836 Halifax Street location. This is located in the Heritage neighborhood, literally right beside 3 other agencies who offer the exact same services. We are there today because back then, that is where we could find a building from which to provide our services. However, this meant that the people we were serving out of North Central needed to make the journey across the city to Halifax Street. A few years ago, Labor Ready relocated from Broad Street to where it is now on Albert Street, only a few blocks from where our new building will be located. I mention this because historically approximately 50% of the men who use our shelter work. Relocating our men's emergency shelter within a few blocks of Labor Ready will immediately help these men. And if the men who use our shelter are not working, we try to help them find permanent housing or job skills training, such as what is provided at the Regina Skills Center, which, just like Labor Ready, is located only a couple blocks away from where our new building will be. Relocating the men's emergency shelter into North Central is a win-win. as we are relocating a necessary service back into an area where such a service does not exist, when the need for such a service has been evident for years. For more than 10 years, Souls Harbor Rescue Mission has been providing a community meal in North Central for Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Each of these events see hundreds of people from North Central come out for the meal and for the care and support that we offer them through the hundreds of volunteers that give of their love and time to help make these events successful. We see some of the same people at Halifax Street, many of them without transportation, who have had to find another way to get to Halifax for a nutritious meal. Many of these families who come to our Halifax location for a meal live and rent here in North Central, but their income barely covers their monthly living expenses, let alone groceries for their families. Moving our meal program to North Central will bring a much-needed and valuable service to the community. Our free clothing store only complements these services by helping empower those we work with through the provision of newer clothes to help with the job interview or help with their monthly expenses as they struggle to provide clothing for their children. North Central is in need of these services designed to help and to offer hope without the added burden of limited access. Another key component of this new building is the addition of 16 more low-income suites. This will be in addition to the 30 low-income suites that we currently have at the same location. Souls Harbor Rescue Mission sees ourselves as working in partnership with the Mayor's homelessness strategy, and as such, we continue to pursue and grow a variety of relationships with several local agencies who are desperately looking for places to rent for their hard-to-house clients. We cannot cover all the necessary components involved in the city's desire to minimize
you have about 1
homelessness,
minute to go.
but we feel that offering an additional 16 low-income suites is a step in the right direction. In closing, may I say that Souls Harbor Rescue Mission's mandate is to help fill a variety of humanitarian needs, and that those needs still exist in North Central. With this new multi-million-dollar environmentally and socially conscious building, we hope to bring back to North Central the services to help meet some of those needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller, for your presentation. And sorry to interrupt, but we do have a pretty tight time frame of 5 minutes only, so I appreciate your accommodating that. Questions of the delegation? Councilor Fundura.
Thank you, Your Worship, to you. Just one quick question.
Sure.
What would you say to your neighbors, or your new neighbors that you come into the neighborhood? What would you like to say to them?
What would I say to them? We have a banquet that we hold every year. We call it our Love Your Neighbor Banquet. We move into North Central for that purpose. We go in to provide shelter. We go in to provide daycare in this case. We go in to feed. We go in to offer hope. We're not there to increase the crime rate. We're not there to diminish your property values. We're there to assist you as you continue on your life journey and as you try and make ends meet. We want to help you. We're not there to be a hindrance.
Thank you for that, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Fundura. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Evening, Mr. Miller. You and I are going to talk this through a little bit, if you don't mind. Let's start with the building.
Yes, sir.
What's in the building?
We have what the other gentleman referred to as the soup kitchen. That's our meal program. So we'll bring that over. We'll double the capacity of our men's emergency shelter from 12 spaces to 24. And then we'll add another 60-spot subsidized daycare. The gentleman mentioned there's children in the neighborhood. Hopefully we can provide that service. And in addition to that, we'll add 16 more low-income affordable housing suites.
All in the one building, am I correct?
All in the one building, sir.
Thanks. Would you mind describing the drop-off availability, how that will work if I came with my vehicle full of stuff?
What we've done is in the design we've incorporated kind of like a drive-through. You go to Tim Hortons, same idea. Except our donor can come, whether it's raining, snowing, whatever the weather conditions are, come in through the back garage in the back alley, drive in, unload in comfort, and then drive out. We also believe that this will help minimize the parking, the need for parking.
Good, thanks. You have an existing building there right now.
Yes.
Do people congregate in and around that building? Do do things they shouldn't be doing around that building?
There will always be some people, yes, obviously. People visit outside. One of the good things about this project is when it's built, we will actually enhance the neighborhood. It's a $7 million facility. There'll be some green place. You're always going to have people that visit. When people get together, that's human nature. Is there hundreds or 200s? I think our old location, the one on Halifax Street, you're probably looking at 20 to 30, maybe 40 at a time. We kind of use a come and dine approach. So our seating capacity is such that we can serve up to 120. So people are coming in and leaving, coming in and leaving to try and minimize that congestion out front as well.
Okay, thanks. Between the two buildings, there's some green space and so on. Why have you got that, and what advantage is that for you?
Well, I think it just dresses up the neighborhood. One, I don't see it as diminishing. I don't think a $7 million building diminishes your property value. And, in some sense, we're a bit of a gateway into the area where the old stadium is. And as the city fills that location, once the stadium is gone, then we kind of are a bit of a doorway into that area as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you use cameras or anything like that, or do you have rules for people that are using your facility?
It's a no alcohol, no drug facility. That's been our policy for 26 years. So that helps to minimize the risk for harm. The facility itself will be staffed 24 hours, and there will be cameras internally and externally on the property, outside, and in the hallways, in the rooms, in the various areas of the facility itself.
Thank you. Is there staff on 8 hours a day or?
24 hours, yeah. Round the clock there will be staff.
Thanks. You made a comment at Planning Commission, so this is kind of a leading question, but you
Sure.
talked a little bit about some of your other facilities and upkeep and so on. Could you just describe why that may or may not be important to you?
I'm trying to remember what I said.
About
Actually, I think I was talking about, I took over as the executive director about 7 years ago, and at that time, Souls Harbor owned 7 properties in the city. Within the first year, I had sold 3 of them because after some conversation with my board, we felt they were in a state of disrepair. They were an eyesore, and it's not something that I don't want to maintain that image. So we worked very hard at breaking that down. We've put hundreds of thousands of dollars into our Athol Street facility. We put hundreds of thousands of dollars into the 8th Avenue facility. This existing soup kitchen and shelter is at that point where it's just not feasible anymore to put any more money in it. So we've always tried to maintain a good image and to be a good corporate neighbor. I think the commission themselves interviewed some of the people in the old neighborhood where we are, and if I remember correctly, it came back and there wasn't a significant negative feedback regarding the facility that we were running on Halifax and still are on Halifax Street.
Would it be your intent to maintain this property to a certain standard?
Absolutely. We're strong financially. We're in the best position we've ever been. We have cash reserves. We're able to do preventative maintenance, not your catch up where you're chasing the problems. So we will do our best to maintain the facility itself and to ensure that we're contributing to the neighborhood in numerous ways.
Thank you. My last question, Mr. Mayor. I've heard reference in the community to needles, and that this place may, foster that kind of debris in the area. Could you just comment on that, please?
I think the debris is already in the area. You need only walk down the back alley to see that. And I think, if anything, a drug and alcohol-free facility will help to minimize that. It's not a practice that we as an organization encourage.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Donald. Councilor Berciani?
Thank you, Mr. Miller, for feeding our homeless. On behalf of Regina, we are so lucky to have an organization like yours, like Souls Harbor. And being an emergency shelter, I did take a look there and saw the 16 beds when it was minus 35. And so just a couple questions. When it's so cold out, what I did notice is that I know they have to leave early in the morning and they have to find a place. They can come back then, usually they will go to the Marion Center, which is located across the street.
Yes.
And they have to be gone by about 1 o'clock. And then they have to find another place to get warm. And then they can come back to Souls Harbor about 4 o'clock and then have a supper, and then they have, some can stay and some have to leave. So I guess the question I have, if you are located in North Central, where would these people go in which to find a place to get warm, I guess? So if they have to leave in the morning, where would they go? And I agree, if the bridge is going to be to go to find, the work for even, odd jobs. But is there an area there that, so they can go and keep warm? Because I know that was kind of one of the things that I did notice. It's just one of the questions.
We would, I think people will go where they always go. And, people do travel, so I think they would, a lot of them would probably go to visit friends. You're going to see some of the, going to the library. You're going to see them still make the trip across back to other organizations. There are a lot of organizations in the Heritage Center, and so they can kind of move around in their circle. We would love to be 24-hour. We'll staff the facility for 24 hours. We'd love to be able to offer every one of our programs for 24 hours. Reality is, with an overall revenue budget that is less than 10% government funded, we're just not in that position. This project, with a daycare and the expansion of the men's shelter, will add 15 jobs alone, and we're going to pick up a big chunk of that. So, is there room for our programs to grow? Yes. How long does it take for us as an organization to get there? I can't really answer that. We always try to grow where there is the need, and now our biggest need is we have a facility that's falling apart, and the need, you're right, the humanitarian need is still there, and we view ourselves as part of the solution. We're not the entire solution. I think it would be a big mistake to say we are.
Thank you. And one more question. Would your board of directors be open to working with neighbors that are adjacent and close that have concerns about safety and things like that, where they have genuine concerns and they would want to, meet regularly with the board to discuss some of these, to kind of keep the lines of communication open?
One of the things, I don't want to speak for my board, and second thing is I operate with a governance board, and they would probably, in all honesty, kick that question back to me and then say, come tell us what you're doing about it or what you're suggesting. But we have a proposed daycare, and as part of that we have PAC meetings. They're parent advisory committees, so we're already meeting regularly with the parents that are bringing their children, as an example, and listening to their concerns. So that happens at the Athol Street location where we have our daycare now.
Right, sorry. But just with homeowners around the area, I guess that was one of the things. Would there be any openness to discussion?
Yeah, we're willing to discuss them. When we held the open house, normally the city does the open house in an independent location. We offered our Athol Street location. We put out some appetizers and things. The whole idea was for us to communicate and to engage in conversation. And there were quite a few people that came to that. And we were able, at the end of that process, to sit down with a lot of them and address their questions one-on-one. And some of them, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, right?
Yeah, okay.
And some still held their viewpoint, and some didn't when they understood, a little better on what the project entailed.
Okay. Thank you again for the work you do.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Barshani. Other questions of the delegation? Councilor Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
You're welcome.
Just a quick question in regards to the congregation that you speak of at your current location, sometimes say 30, 40 people. In a given month, would you be able to estimate how often you receive calls for service from the RPS? Is that?
Maybe one or two. I couldn't tell you, to be honest. I'd have to ask.
I know it's okay. And my next question is in regards to the would you be able to paint a picture of the type of person that Souls Harbor helps and provides a service for? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there.
Well, I use this example a lot. I mean, we deal with food, shelter, clothing. You know, and we say hope begins with a meal, and then we say real answers for real people at the same time. So we deal with people who are homeless. We deal with people who are hungry. We deal with addicted. We run a women's addiction program where women can go into recovery with their children. There's maybe 6 or 7 programs, one-year programs like that in the country. And it's not unusual for us to have a woman come with 5 or 6 or 7 children. Our last renovation on that property, we had to add family suites because we were seeing more women with children than we were seeing single women. We deal with at-risk youth. We use a partnership model at our Athol Street location, and we partner with like-minded organizations such as City Kids. We don't have the funds to run all of the programming, so we have this facility that we renovated. So if we can partner with someone, then we'll provide the facility free of charge, and they can deal with the youth of North Central. The youth come from outside of North Central as well. So it's a real mixture of clientele and guests, but I use the Athol Street property itself as an example. I remember years ago when we bought that property, it was ready for the wrecking ball, and we bought it from Affinity for $50,000, and I came here and I appeared before the council to try and get a break on the back taxes on the facility of $150,000, and I didn't get it because they didn't want to set a precedent, and I understand that. But that building was deemed unfit. We put $1.3 million into that building, and today it's a very good facility, and it serves a great need within our community. So I think the people that we serve are just like that building. We take people that, you know, unfortunately, I think some of society discards and says have no value and are ready for the wrecking ball, but we don't view them in the same light.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. Any other questions of the delegation? I want to explore just one point in your submission, Mr. Miller, and it's sort of intriguing to me. If you could amplify on this one, that you say you want to work in partnership with the Mayor's homelessness strategy, and I find that intriguing. Just give you a chance, a platform to say a few words about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I think there's some common things. Like I think we all need shelter. I think we all need to have a place that we can call home. We all want the welcome mat. I know the hard to house strategy says let's take someone, whether they're drinking or not, and put them in a facility, and then let's deal with the problem or the issue at hand after that. We've been putting them in our facility. For the most part, they come to us in that state. We just say, we think you can beat this. And so we try and deal with that at the same time. So it's a bit of a different approach. But we've been buying, as another example, we've been buying lots in North Central for the last while. So we've been accumulating empty lots. And that's part of I'm really way out there now, but that's a much longer strategy where we think we can actually develop something to provide home ownership. And so we have the ability to take someone that's homeless and take care of their immediate physical needs and put them in a suite, a low-income suite, get them some skills, and then try and move them on so that they can become productive members of society. So that's what I think where we're coming from when we say we want to partner with that.
That's a valuable contribution, and thank you very much for what you do each and every day.
Thank you
very much. No other questions of the delegation. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now look at report 16133, which is a contract zone application for a humanitarian service facility at 1610 Angus Street. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you again. May I have a seconder? I'll speak to this.
Seconder, please. Councilor Barshani.
Thank you. So, Mr. Miller answered a lot of the questions. I just identify again that what you're being asked to do is allow a construction of a building that will be built to a very high standard, that will have a number of possibilities within the building, including daycare, housing, and food. I want to emphasize a couple of points that both the delegation made and that I heard. When we asked at Planning Commission about the number of meals, for example, to be served, There was a little hesitancy on what that number might be compared to what is offered, but what was clear was that the clientele might change. And I say that from this point of view. There are only 2 men's shelters in all of Regina, but there are 7 for women. And so some of the men may not gravitate to this area, but women and children may come to this development for relief. And so I want you to bear that in mind. 2, delegation made reference to a building that's on Dooney and Athol Street. I've been by it many times. I knew it when it was in poor shape. And I would tell you, to answer the question of the first delegation, I would tell you that if you walk past that building and saw the courtyard that's in front, the stature of the building, the cleanliness and so on, it has elevated the values of the houses that are adjacent to it on Athol and across from the park that's there. To the question that was asked before as well, we often hear when we're listening to large-scale developments that may be rental, for example, or high density, and people often talk about decreased values. And yet, if you look at the market conditions of what's happened in Regina, that has not been bore out. And other people have spoken to that as well. See, this is a very valuable addition to our community. It's a very strong building in terms of its presence, but it's also a strong building in terms of its design. Septet, cameras, rules, regulations, ladies, children, and men, food, and opportunity. We made also reference to the fact that nearby are 2 facilities that have moved to the area, one being labor ready, in other words, job, and also training. These are all within walking distance of this area. We would seek your concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move on to report 134, which is a zoning bylaw amendment to move from MAC 3 to MAC at Quan Street and Willow Road. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. I'm struggling with my computer a little bit, but anyway, this is the first time that some of our councillors have seen this. This is a change. Sorry, I'll get a seconder if I could.
Seconder first. Councillor Young.
Thanks very much. So this is a designation for the type of property and what you can put into it. And so there are some buildings that are currently sitting vacant, and the proponent has come forward and said, here's some things that we would like to do. If we can change the designation from MAC 3 to MAC, it gives us a wider variety of what we can put in there, and we can redevelop the buildings. Quite honestly, we had limited discussion on this, and we saw this as being a good thing for the east side of the city. Seek concurrence, please.
Discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Before we get to the next report, I just wanted to recognize that we have the Mayor of Pilot Butte who's here, I believe. Peggy Chorney, welcome to our chambers. Hope you have a good time listening to it all. Move on to report 134, which is, we're into 135, which is a zoning amendment application at 1900 and 1920 McCarra Street. Councillor O'Donnell.
I want you to know I'm winging this without my iPad, so I'm doing the best I can. So one, I'll do it in a second if you don't mind. So if I get a second.
Seconder, please. Councillor Federa.
Thank you. So in this area called Tuxedo, we have a real mix of business types that is in here. And what is described in here is what used to be a rail line. And so one of the businesses would like to extend their business size so that they can make use of this property. And again, the only issue that we really had with this one was some access back there. We were assured that at the time of permit that they would be closing that off, and so it would be well controlled and so on. Again, we didn't have any problem with this.
Thank you for that. Questions or comments? I have a question of clarification to the administration to Ms. Harlech. Who owns the land? Is it privately held?
Through your worship, I would defer that to Mr. Krawczyk.
Through you, Mr. Worship, the land is owned by the city, and it would be sold and then amalgamated to the business's property.
Okay, so the point I would make is that it's a bit confusing. We own the land, but we're selling the land in terms of the report, so it's a bit confusing. We're simply consolidating land, is all we're really doing. We're not selling the land to ourselves. Just to Ms. Howlack?
Through you, Your Worship, we will be selling the land to the adjacent landowner eventually, and then consolidating it into their property.
Okay, good. Thanks for clarification. Call a question on the report unless there's any other questions or comments. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're going to separate the bylaws that are coming forward here. So before Councilor Bresciani leaves, Councilor, if you could do bylaws 70, 71, 72, and 73, and then we'll ask Councilor Bresciani to step out for the bylaw 69, if that's possible.
Yes, Your Worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaws number 2016 70, 71, 72, and 73 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has completed its review of these reports and will now consider the associated bylaws after they've received the required public notice. Number 216-70, respecting the proposed rezoning to add a medical clinic as an additional land use at 2703 Victoria Avenue. 216-71, respecting the appropriate MAC zone for a site close to Prince of Wales Drive located at Quan Street and Willow Road. 216-72, respecting the proposed rezoning to permit the expansion of the existing business located at 1920 McCarra Street. And 216-73, respecting the proposed rezoning to accommodate construction of a new 4-story building to be used as a humanitarian service facility at 1610 Angus Street. If there is anyone present in the gallery who wishes to address council on any of these proposed bylaws, I would ask that you now indicate your interest. There appears to be no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the vote on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Young.
I move, seconded by Councillor Stevens, that bylaws numbers 2016 70, 71, 72, and 73 be read a second time.
Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bresciani, that Council hereby consents to bylaws 2016 70, 71, 72, and 73 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaws number 2016 70, 71, 72, and 73 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll wait until we now deal with the bylaw related to the report that Councilor Bresciani was leaving on. Councillor Young.
Thank you. Your Worship, I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaw 2016-69 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now consider bylaw 216-69, respecting the proposed rezoning to accommodate various types of residential development within the southwest corner of the town's approved neighborhood plan. Again, I would ask if there is anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council on this, that they indicate so at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the vote on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Young.
I move, seconded by Councillor Stevens, that bylaw number 2016-69 be read a second time.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that Council hereby consents to bylaw number 2016-69 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaw number 2016-69 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Young. So we'll move on to delegation communications and related reports. We do have a delegation for questions only. I'm not sure it's Emily Weir or Kenneth DeFort. Are either here? Okay. We are considering the University Park Drive application at 166 University Park Drive. Are there any questions of the delegation? We're here to answer questions only. There are none. You're off the hook on this one tonight, so if I get a motion to receive and file the communication. Councilor Barshani? Seconder, please. Councilor Murray, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 136, this is a Planning Commission discretionary use application for a restaurant at 166 University Park Drive. Councilor O'Donnell.
May I have a seconder, please? I'll speak to it.
Seconder. Councilor Murray.
Thanks very much. So there is an existing mall area that has been on this corner for probably a few decades, probably 3 at least. And so there was an existing building there is an existing building. One of the tenants moved out. And so the proposal is to put a Tim Hortons in this restaurant. It's not a drive-through. It is simply a 16-seat restaurant. I want you to know that part of the discussion, obviously, was we looked at the impact that it may or may not have on University Park Drive. But we also looked at this from the notion that this is an existing commercial zone. The idea of putting a restaurant in this zone, no matter which one it is, and other services that are in the area are entirely appropriate. So we endorse this, seek concurrence.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Speakers to the report. Any comments or questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Move on to the report now with respect to Wascana Center Authority and the Building Standards Agreement. Our first delegation on this one is Bernadette McIntyre. Good evening, Ms. McIntyre. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon. I'm Bernadette McIntyre, CEO of Wascana Center Authority, and I'm here to speak in favor of the proposed Building Standards Agreement between the City of Regina and Wascana Center Authority. The City of Regina has been providing building permit services to building owners and contractors for any construction within Wascana Center's boundaries for many years. However, the process has not been properly formalized related to the Uniform Building and Accessibility Standards Act of 1984. To ensure that all the required and proper authorizations are in place, the province, the City of Regina, and Wascana Center have collaborated to clarify the situation and ensure normal operations continue and public safety is assured. The required change to the regulations associated with the Uniform Building and Accessibility Standards Act is in final stage of approval with the province and will be in place by January. Wascana Center Authority created a bylaw of its own, bylaw number 25, that adopts the Uniform Building and Accessibility Standards Act requirements and the requirement to comply with the associated City of Regina Building Bylaw number 2003-7. Wascana Center's bylaw and the proposed joint Performance of Responsibilities Agreement before you today between the City and Wascana Center Authority was approved by Wascana Center's Board of Directors on December 8, 2016. The new bylaw, Wascana Center's new bylaw, was published in the Gazette on December 16, 2016, and is now in force. All building permit applicants will continue to pay the City of Regina the required fees for the services provided. It's usually about $8 per $1,000 of construction costs. The City of Regina delivers the building permit and inspection services on a cost recovery basis. The approval of the recommendations regarding the issuing of building permits within Wascana Center will clarify the requirements, the process, and ensure that the City is able to enforce the applicable bylaws and legislation within Wascana Center. Wascana Center Authority appreciates the diligence and support the City of Regina and the provincial officials have contributed to this resolution, and that it was done in a very timely manner. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. McIntyre, for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Oh, you're perfectly clear. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now consider the report before us. And that is Finance Administration's committee report on this. That would be Councillor Young to introduce it. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm introducing Finance and Admin 1634, and Mrs. McIntyre did a beautiful job of summarizing it, but I will summarize what the report says.
Okay, we'll just get a seconder for that, if I could, please, first. Councillor Dowell.
Okay. It authorizes administration to finalize the terms of a joint performance agreements between the City of Regina and Wascana Centre Authority under the Uniform Building and Accessibility Standards Act, UBASA. The execution of the agreement requires a minor legislative change to UBASA by the province and the adoption of a bylaw by Wascana Centre Authority, which we heard this evening has already been done and it has been approved. These two changes clarifies the intent of the agreement between the two authorities. A minor change was needed to be made to UBASA to ensure that the statutory intent is clear and that it applies within Wascana Centre. It was also determined that the bylaw was needed by Wascana Centre Board, and that has been done. The city has traditionally exercised building regulation authority within Wascana Centre. This is not new, and it has been done since the Act in 1984. Wascana Centre Authority requires the services of the city with regard to this Act for the administration and enforcement of building and accessibility standards. So this agreement will mean the city will continue to administer UBASA in Wascana Centre on a cost recovery basis, funded by permit and inspection fees. Finance and Administration seeks concurrence on this, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Are there any discussions on this report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to our next delegation, Chad Novak. Good evening, Mr. Novak. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent, you as well have 5 minutes for your presentation, and maybe questions afterwards.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chad Novak, and I am here representing the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization proudly standing up for the rights of individual taxpayers. I'm here to address the 2015 reserve balances. Something that I am very proud to be responsible for is ensuring that our city provides fair and equitable treatment to all taxpayers of Regina. Now, with that in mind, given the numbers contained within this report, it seems that City Council and Administration have been unfairly going back to the taxpayers for higher property taxes and higher water rates when every single year for at least the last decade they've realized quite significant surpluses. Now, keeping in mind that these surpluses that I refer to are only those that are realized when compared to the budget, which would be in addition to any budgeted surpluses and transfers as the case may be. Now, I want to make it perfectly clear that contrary to what your administration has asserted, as an accountant and a conservative financial planner, I am very much in support of the use of reserves. In fact, I can't think of many who wouldn't be in support of the use of reserves, or, as they call them, rainy day funds, as the case may be. Now, the only question that I have, however, which your administration has yet failed to properly address, is the reasonability of those reserve levels. It's even been stated that these reserves help our credit rating. To which I would respond simply, show us exactly how much reserves are required to maintain that credit rating and how lower levels or higher levels would impact that. Your administration can say these levels are minimal and relatively minor all they want, but until they can demonstrate to the public how it compares to other jurisdictions, like in the benchmarking program that you just signed up for, it is very unfair and in fact irresponsible to make these assertions without any backup. I have come to understand and very much appreciate that the City Administration and Council chooses to budget conservatively. Now, as a risk-averse person myself, I am very pleased with this approach because more often than not, you're going to realize better financial results than you project. This is supported by the fact that the City of Regina has realized a surplus every single year for at least the past decade. Unfortunately for residents, however, more often than not, there has also been a property tax rate increase. The question that I can't help but wonder, and so many great citizens of Regina do as well, why then are they being asked to pitch in more every year when every year we're also realizing quite substantial surpluses, which continue to simply inflate these already quite large reserves. I appreciate the reasoning that reserves are intended for, quote-unquote, unexpected and one-time expenditures. One must ask, then, exactly how much is reasonable to keep in the reserves, and how many unexpected one-time expenditures have we actually realized over the past decade, and how many can we reasonably expect in the next? So in the end, just how much do we actually need in the reserves, and when is it considered to be too much before you start going back to the taxpayers to fund what our reserves and annual surpluses could easily, either in part or in whole? As you will see, or as you can see by the summary I put together in Appendix A, our reserves have actually skyrocketed over the last decade by over 500%. Now, while the residents have been looked to each and every year for more property taxes, our water bills, as you'll see in Appendix B, have more than doubled in that same time frame. Now, with this in mind, I want you to go on record this evening by telling the residents of Regina exactly why it is that you feel comfortable, if you do, with going back to them for more property taxes, while we've steadily grown our reserves to over $236.7 million by the end of 2015, with no end in sight.
Just under 1 minute to go.
Thank you, sir. I want you to go on record and explain to them why you've been okay with continual hefty increases in their water bills while the utility reserve sits at record levels, nearly $80 million by the end of 2015, with no long-term plan to deplete it, even by a minimal amount. I want you to go on record and explain to them why you're okay with charging them for recycling when the landfill realizes a multi-million-dollar annual surplus and currently has over $20 million in the reserves and could easily fund this program. When it comes budget time, I challenge each and every one of you to raise the question to your administration. How can we fund these budget increases other than going back to the taxpayers? That is assuming, of course, that by that time, you've already done everything you can to ensure that those budget increases asked for by your various departments and partners have been scrutinized to ensure maximum efficiency for the taxpayer. I thank you for your time this evening and will gladly answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Novak, for your presentation. Once again, turn this thing off. Any questions of the delegation? Well, I think you were very clear on your submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We look to the Finance and Administration for the 2015 reserve balances. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. Finance and Admin 1635 refers to the reserve balances, and you're being asked by this recommendation that no transfers be made between reserves at this time. And the reason for that is that there is a review underway to be completed in 2017. Reserves are a critical component of the city's long-range financial planning, and this review is going to inform the appropriateness of maximums and minimums that will support services and service levels. The review is going to align the reserves with the OCP, the long-range financial model, and the financial policies framework, all of which work to ensure that long-term financial goals of the city are achieved. Finance and Admin recommends congruence, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Hawkins. Speakers to the report. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question for the administration. I wonder if the administration can tell us the kind of factors that go into determining the minimum and maximum level of reserves.
Mr. Ray. Here's an easy question for you.
Yes, Your Worship, members of the City Council. So the factors are really several. Three main reasons, actually. We want to be prepared for the future. So that's a rainy day fund, as was previously mentioned, but also planned expenditures. So, for example, in 2016, we had nearly $100 million from reserves spent on capital projects to improve our infrastructure. So there's both rainy day fund, planned capital expenditures. We also want to avoid fluctuations in taxes on any given year. So, for example, if we needed $100 million this year, For capital projects, we certainly wouldn't want to look at a $100 million tax bill to fund it. As well, the third one is really about ensuring that we're able to maintain services and service levels for our citizens of all the various services we provide and the infrastructure that supports that. It also is important with respect to ensuring that we are in a strong financial position so that we can maintain our strong credit rating and keep our cost of debt low.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if I could just follow up on that by asking, when you're setting the actual numbers of reserves, 5, 15, what are the factors that you look at in setting those numbers? For example, would you look at the historical record to determine those numbers? Are there other factors?
Mr. Ray?
Yes, we look at historical costs, but also very important to look forward, anticipating what the needs are in the future. As an example, our solid waste plant or facility, we know that when it reaches end of life, we will need some $30-odd million to decommission that asset. So, again, we would need to ensure when that day arrives, we have that reserve, that funds available to avoid unnecessary or large fluctuations. The other thing we have as a matter of principle is we want to fund our users, fund our assets, and including the long-term maintenance and replacement, so that we don't kind of use the tax our grandchildren approach, where we haven't built up the levels.
Thank you. Thank you. Very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you. Just a question further to that. Just touch on a little bit the insight more specifically on the utility reserves.
Sure. Mr. Ray.
So, just one moment. So I'll mention that I'm just going to make a couple of general comments on reserves first and then related to utilities. So our overall reserve position has strengthened over the last 5 years. Increased almost 70% from $126 million in 2011 to $214 in 2015, and that was primarily due to the need to save for major projects such as our wastewater treatment plant, which was announced today. The reserves are projected to decrease by the end of 2016 based on our approved capital plan. Having said that, though, reserves will increase, and particularly in the area of utilities, over the next few years, between now and 2021, to 230.6. There's a number of very significant capital investments we need to make. The one I mentioned with respect to our ability to close our landfill in the future. And as well, I'm going to ask Ms. Gazmo to talk about some other utility projects that are in the works.
Ms. Gazmo.
Through Your Worship, the utility is planned on a 20-year model that takes into consideration major capital projects that will occur over that 20-year model, as well plans for annual infrastructure and service needs that are required to deliver drainage, wastewater, and water services. So just to provide a couple examples, in the model right now we show expenditures for drainage that are in the range of $74 million over the next 9 years. In addition to that, the model shows an additional, I believe it's, sorry, let me just check here. Another $5 million a year over the remaining years in the model for the annual infrastructure needs. With respect to the water and wastewater services, we're undertaking master plans right now for both of those services that will help inform the model and what some of the future expenditures are. And there's some placeholders in the model right now for what's anticipated to come out of those master plans. Additionally, we know that to meet some of the wastewater requirements that are required by the Water Security Agency, we have $40 million of projects in there. We also have about $15 million in the wastewater portion of it for annual expenditures just to maintain the infrastructure related to that service. And then with respect to water, of course, there's the rates that are paid to Buffalo Pound Treatment Plant to pay for the provision of water services, and that also accommodates the capital expenditures that they have to maintain that plant. So in addition to the rates paid for the water, we also have costs associated with maintaining the infrastructure, the infrastructure for the distribution system. And again, there's $12 to $15 million a year in the model for that type of work as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Brushy. Any other speakers to the report? I have, sorry, Councilor Flagel, sorry.
Thanks. I knew you would forgive me. The one thing that, if I could, just on what Ms. Gasman just finished saying, is that we would have had about $180 million of surplus if the provincial government were to change the rules of disposing of. So talk about a rainy day fund, that's probably the biggest one we've ever had in this city of Regina. But they've talked about all the underground infrastructure ones. There's a huge amount of rainy day money that we've spent since I've been on council. If you talk the Big Dig, Eventplex, widening of Victoria Avenue, International Trade Center, stadium, wastewater, air quality at the Lawson, $5 million. Is it $5 million we're going to spend at Edward Street over the next 5 years in terms of sewage and stuff? Maybe not quite 5. Yeah, but contract shortfalls and increases. You're dealing with Buffalo Pound upgrades, bridge reconstruction across the Ring Road. This money just doesn't fall out of the sky. It's always planned, and I want to attribute a lot of it to ourselves and to the administration for putting a plan together and also keeping our rating. I don't know if it's the highest, but it's very close to being one of the highest credit ratings we've got across Canada, or Western Canada for sure. That bodes well for this city. No city wants to be in debt. You look at Detroit, it's a mess. Why? The economy went down. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's a little bit close to home, I know, but it's just one of those things.
I wasn't there, so go ahead and
no,
say what
you weren't
want.
there. It wasn't anything you did, so you're good. You're in good standing with us. So, but if you look at those types of things across the board, if you stop doing what we're doing and just expel the money, look at people's personal lives. Their incomes have changed. Their things have changed. Their debt loads have increased, and they've had to leave houses, they've had to move, they've had to do all kinds of things because the income just isn't there. We have an opportunity to sustain this city, and I think we're doing a great job, and I'm fully in support of anything that we do financially. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flagel. Councilor Young, could you take the chair for a moment, please? Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a question to the administration, then I'll have a comment. I want to talk for a moment about the review that's going to be conducted in 2017. What is the purpose of it, the intent, and how does it differ from the regulations that we have today? Not that we necessarily know what we have in mind right now, what is the purpose of it?
Mr. Ray?
Your Worship, members of the City Council. So the reserve review is underway. We hope to be able to report back on it late in 2017. The purpose is to really take an overall look at how reserves contribute to our long-range financial planning. It will look at what we need reserves for, and it'll do an assessment of what the minimums and maximums with respect to each reserve should be, and put some policy and methodology in place in behind that. Our current reserves, for the most part, are pretty sound, I think, although we do have a few very tiny ones that are not really that material. They may disappear. There could be other areas where we need additional reserve for specific costs. So a thorough review, a good solid policy, set of policies in support of, and clear link between it and our long-range financial plan.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much for just a couple of comments. Councilor Flagel talked about this in one sense, but I just want to add to it or take another dimension of this one. When we look at the tax that we receive as a municipality, 8 cents of every tax dollar that taxpayers pay to all levels of government come to municipalities. 8 cents of every dollar. Yeah, we're responsible for most of the services that people see, touch, feel, and use every day. So we're trying to find a balance between sustainability and affordability. And this is not an easy thing to do. This is the art of governance. But we do need and want to have some fairly transparent and empirical ways to look at what's the right amount that we would have for reserves for our utilities. Well, those are separate and distinct from the taxpayer. That's not in your tax bill, it's a separate one. What do we do for our landfill? We have to decommission a landfill, start a new one. Let's make sure we're sustainable to do that so we don't have to go back to the taxpayers and say, we made a big mistake, we need $15 million or $10 million or whatever it might be. So this council, previous councils, and this administration has done, I think, a great job of trying to strike that balance between sustainability, being concerned about what could happen. We had 2 summers ago, we had a problem with our water plant in Buffalo Pound. That cost us money to fix that. That was unanticipated. We need to fix that plant with the new electrical system, which we're going to do. Maybe a new plant in the coming years. That's $140 million. We just built a wastewater treatment plant. We just built a stadium. We just built the International Trade Center, as we mentioned before. This is the balance of growth of our city, being demands of growth and funding it fairly and reasonably. And we can look for orders of government to help us in terms of capital projects, which we do. But the operation and maintenance of these facilities, these services, is the art of finding the balance between reserves to take bumps out of the road and unanticipated problems, and also affordability. I welcome the review. I welcome the discussion that will happen, because we'll look at minimum and maximum balances in these reserves, because there's no right or wrong here. Except if we didn't have reserves, that would be really wrong, because we'd be going to the taxpayers even more, and we'd have some big problems on our hands. So this is the wisdom of council, the past and the future, and the administration helping us craft a policy that gives us sustainability in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Young. Are there other speakers to the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next delegation is Mr. Novak again. This is with respect to the winter maintenance summary. Mr. Novak, if you can identify yourself again for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you once again. Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chad Novak, and I'm here representing the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization proudly standing up for the rights of individual taxpayers. I'm here this time to address the annual winter maintenance summary. Something that I am very proud to be responsible for is ensuring that our city provides fair and equitable treatment to all taxpayers of Regina. Now, with that in mind, I am here tonight to recommend a major improvement to our winter maintenance program that I feel would provide all Regina residents with something of great value for their property tax dollars. What's even better is it's a relatively inexpensive program which can be easily funded within our current winter maintenance budget and or the surpluses/reserves that we have been and continue to be accumulated. Now, before I get into specifics of that suggestion, I would like to address the forecasted balance in the winter maintenance reserve at the end of this year. Now, it is noted that we currently have a balance of $3.9 million and a projected surplus this year of nearly $3.5 million, even though somehow in the report it only says $1.1 million, which is similar to last year. But if you do the math in there, that's not what you get. Regardless, it further notes that the maximum reserve allowed is $3.923 million. And further to my delegation on our reserves, I think it's essential that we realize exactly when we have accumulated too much money and make the hard decision as to what to do with that money. We've been blessed with some amazing weather the past 2 winters, so why not reward taxpayers by reallocating the entirety of these projected funds to at least partially offset any projected mill rate increase for 2017. Now, on to my suggestion that I feel all residents would be heavily in support of. That is residential sidewalk snow removal. I brought this issue up to the mayor almost 4 years ago, and at that time, if memory serves me, he had committed to look further into it, but warned that he felt that it would be too costly to implement, even though I had provided him the exact same information directly from the City of Winnipeg, that proved that this program was actually very cost-effective. I have included that same information in Appendix A for your reference, but suffice it to say, at a cost of $1.17 per property, or $58.33 per kilometer, I feel it is a very reasonable and attainable cost within our current winter maintenance budget. But even if it did require extra funding, I am quite confident that if you had no other choice but to go back to the taxpayers to fund this minimal cost, a majority would be very much in support of it. Further, if you factor in the fact that all sidewalks adjacent to our streets are actually city-owned, and therefore the city's responsibility, it just makes sense to do this. Not just for the removal of potential liability for slip and falls, but also to add convenience for flyer deliveries, courier deliveries, and most importantly, to allow all Regina residents to enjoy their neighborhoods without any barriers. It would also increase the accessibility of our sidewalks throughout our great city, which perfectly aligns with the City of Regina's mission statement of being an inclusive city. I thank you for your time again this evening, and I will gladly answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Novak, for your presentation. Other questions? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll look at Information Report 16-11, Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, Annual Winter Maintenance Summary. Councillor Young.
Your Worship, I bring forward Public Works 1611 Annual Winter Maintenance Summary.
Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Flagel.
This is a report to be received and filed for. It's an information report. I would like to tell you 2 things that happened at Public Works. One was that we were pleased to see that winter maintenance met its policy objective 100% of the time. And the committee commended the winter maintenance cost avoidance of $717,000, which reallocated winter staff to other areas of the city, and it reduced the requirement for contracted services. It also provided mutual benefits to the other departments and through collaboration among those departments. So we thought that was an excellent process, and that we thought that that's one of the ways that one saves money is by working together across departments. The second thing that happened at Public Works was a referral motion that passed and refers the cost portion of clearing Category 1, 2, 3 bike lanes to the 2017 budget process. Bicycle Regina was there, and they argued that not including clearing of bike lanes deters riders from taking those paths in the winter and opting for using cars. And the argument made that the case that the absence of riders on winter paths, they said, is determined by the condition of the paths, rather than an absence of riders on the paths that are not well utilized in the winter. So I bring this forward, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Speakers to the report. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. I just have a couple questions. It was not part of the committee. My first question is, and this is my most oft-winter asked question, we used to always have snow fences in areas that were adjacent to open areas so that would catch the snow. But we don't seem to have very many snow fences anymore. How come we don't have snow fences?
Ms. Gizmo, you know the answer to that, don't you?
I actually don't. I'm going to ask Mr. Kyle, the Director of Roadways and Transportation, to help out with that.
Mr. Kyle.
Thanks.
Please elucidate for us.
Okay, through you, Your Worship. Actually, we do still use snow fences in some areas, but what we started doing a few years ago is when we do the snow removal adjacent to some of these open areas, we will pile the snow up in windrows and use the natural snow piles to to act like a snow fence would and break the snow in those areas from drifting.
Okay, thanks. I may suggest a couple of areas where might look at the fence again. Anyway.
Like your front yard?
Yeah, well, no.
Oh,
no,
just
no,
one
I'm good.
bit, okay.
I'm good. My second question is, in regards to the snow storage site and our fees, are we going to get a report at the end of the year that will explain how that works? Assuming we get snow this winter, I realize.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, yes, if we're, the snow storage site is up and open, but presuming we get snow and it gets utilized, we'll definitely bring a report back.
Good. My last question, if you don't mind, is we had talked about the idea, and I think the capture is snow routes project and so on, and removing vehicles. So can I ask where we are at that with that project?
Excuse me?
Through your worship, there's a report coming to the next Public Works and Infrastructure meeting on that.
Okay. All right. Good. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks, and I'll follow up with the snow fence. The councillors that are on the perimeter of the city always have a challenge because I have one in particular, and it's in Uplands in Alpart Crescent. The guy, I've seen it. It's like 14 feet high. Ms. Howerluck and I were out at the site looking at it, and it's like amazing. They can just ski right off their roof because it's open, and the little 3-foot snow rows don't work. So we need some 8-footers or whatever it is. So a couple of years ago and last year, both myself and Mayor Fougere talked about it, and I think we even talked about it when Mayor, you were the councillor as well for the area. The narrow streets that we're designing are becoming a problem when there's, maybe not in the last 2 years, but in the last years prior, we can't get enough snow removal in there. We're making people park on the peripheral streets. We're making people get out of there. They can't get into their back alleys because we're designing streets that are only 30 feet wide, and a lot of the normal other streets in the city are a little bit wider. We did put a plan together, and there was talk in the southeast, Harbor Landing, Lakeridge Addition, different areas like that we're going to get a better cleaning system. And I know, maybe to enlighten us as to if you push snow, it's X. If you haul it away, it's X. Can you tell us the difference in the cost? And what can we do about the narrow streets in some of the areas that I just mentioned?
Ms. Kiesball?
Through your worship, I'll have Mr. Kyle provide some of the information on the difference in cost between just plowing and cost from removal. I think he could also comment on, we're doing a bit of a review of parking on narrow streets and how that might play into some of the conversations around winter road maintenance.
Okay. Mr. Kyle?
Through your worship, I don't have the exact numbers, but typically we spend less than a third of our snow removal on the first portion of the snow season, so from October to December. The other 2/3 get spent from January to March, and the reason for the variance in the expenditure is typically it takes until that period before we get enough accumulation that we have to start removing it. So just a ballpark estimate would be probably around a third of our budget goes into removal when we start removing.
So if I could just in that question, if pushing snow is $1, removing the snow would be $5, $4?
Mr. Kyle?
Roughly?
Off the top of my head, I can't quantify the numbers.
Okay, yeah, okay, carry on, thanks.
As far as the narrow streets, we are doing a look at a parking study for narrow streets, but we will also be involved in reviews and updates to the city's development standards that set the road width. So we will be looking at that to work with the development community and development engineering and planning to determine the appropriateness of local roads.
Do we know when this will take place? Because winter's here, we haven't had the big snowstorm yet, but it's coming.
Mr. Kyle?
The steering committee for the development standards review has just kicked off in the last month, so that is getting underway here.
Thank you. Another question, just in the quick maintenance of things, is the belly plows and sanding trucks as a combination of the two. Are we using a lot of them, or have we gone away from the belly plow? Because it seems to take away the scrape and gets rid of like a half a rut instead of a full foot. It might take it down a half a foot. Are we still using those quite a bit?
Ms. Kiesball?
Through Through your worship, I think you're referring to the equipment that we use to do like a shaving of the residential roads. Yes, and so that's used when we hit a tolerance or a level service on local roads, and they start to get a rut depth, and we'll go in and we'll shave the ruts down to provide a more rideable surface.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to that, the narrow street things. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, your worship. In some ways, this just continues on the discussion. Local roads. In the spring and the fall, we do a sweep to clean up for leaves. Those sweeps, citizens are asked to remove their cars so that the sweep can be done a straight line along the curb. We also remove snow from local roads, but we don't ask citizens to remove their cars, with the result that you see snow removal going in and out and around cars. Is there any plan to require citizens to remove their cars from local roads when snow removal is being taken place? And further to that, if there's a study, a pilot project on this, can you tell us where we are with the pilot project and when it'll report?
Ms. Gazmo.
Through your worship, we do have, when we come into residential roadways and we've hit a certain depth of snow, we do actually sign those areas, much like we do for a sweep program, and have them remove their cars and go in and do a plow of those. But residential roads are what we call Category 5, and they are not necessarily addressed in every single storm. And sorry, I missed the second part of your question.
Well, with respect to that, I might understand, and I know because I live on one, the residential road, often there's plowed for snow and cars aren't removed so that the plow goes in and out and around the cars. That happens quite frequently, doesn't it?
Yeah, through your worship, there are occasions when we do come in and plow and it isn't signed. And again, that's just to make it passable to get in and out. But when the snow gets to a certain depth and we do have to get in there for a major plow or do some removal, we have and will continue to sign some areas for that operation to occur.
Is there a pilot project? This is the second question. Is there a pilot project with respect to this?
Excuse me?
Through your worship, there is a report that we're bringing forward to Public Works on snow routes that will look at the potential to designate snow routes for more efficient winter maintenance operations.
Will that report include residential roads?
Excuse me?
Through your worship, in the pilot that's being proposed, it will not, but the pilot will give us some indication of how much efficiency is gained and the workability of such a program, and then could be expanded in the future.
Your worship, I'd like to make a comment on this. It's my experience and the experience of the residents of my area that it's frequent that when snow removal takes place on the local roads, that in fact plows go in and out between cars get plowed in, that the snow removal is highly uneven because of parked cars. I think this is a serious concern. I think that consideration should be given to residents, asking residents to move their cars on local roads when snow removal from those roads is taking place, or perhaps routes running east-west could be done, and then north-south could be done to facilitate the removal of cars. But I think it's a significant problem in residential areas that the cars aren't removed when snow removal is taking place. And I would urge the administration, when they're writing the report, to consider this question specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Andrews.
I have a question for the committee as well as for administration. And the first, I ask to prevent a series of complaints from residents, or to address these concerns. And it has to do with, and to follow up on Mr. Novak's query here about sidewalk snow removal. Considering the changing winter conditions that we're experiencing, why not expand the services to include further sidewalk snow removal?
Excuse me?
Through your worship, currently the city plows about 84 kilometers of sidewalk that is owned by the city or adjacent to city properties. The cost to do that per storm right now runs in the range of about $24,000 per storm. There are 1,600 kilometers of sidewalk within the city. So to plow all of those in every storm would be quite significant and require quite a different fleet or other additional contracted services.
Thank you. And my second question has to do with the component of the study related to bike lanes. So as a winter cyclist, I am accustomed to cursing the road conditions, and I never fault the city but my own lunacy for being out there on two wheels. When was the study conducted that displayed limited usage in the winter? Is that current data about how many cyclists there are out there in the winter?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, it is relatively current data. We've looked at the current on-street designated bike routes, and right now there's about 8.9 kilometers of designated on-street bike routes. Of those, all of them are on Category 1 or 2, so they'll get plowed within the first 24 hours. The remaining 1.4 kilometers, those are on Smith Street and Lawrence Street. They actually do get plowed ahead of a Category 3 because they are in the downtown. So there is they do get plowed quite quickly. However, and looking forward to other potential on-street bike routes, the Transportation Master Plan speaks to looking at an additional 41 kilometers in the future. That we'd have to anticipate what that cost would be and how those would be managed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Fundera.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I'm interested in hearing more about your liquid salt. I know that what you mentioned that you are doing a review or study on it. Are we doing anything right now with that particular, instead of throwing salt and sand on it? Are we using any of the liquid salt?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, yes, we purchased equipment last season to pilot using the liquid salt. Of course, with the conditions last year, we didn't get a really good trial of it. So we're going to continue the pilot of that this year to look at the effectiveness of applying liquid salt as opposed to just a dry salt sand.
Okay, Worship, just a comment then. I see this as a good result because I've noticed that if we throw sand and salt on a windy day or whatever, that disappears. So all of a sudden we have a complaint from residents saying we're not out there, right? We're not sanding or we're not doing anything for it. So this, I'm feeling that it will solve some of those issues. When will we see? Of course, probably this coming up summer 2017. Will we see some kind of report from this, Your Worship?
Excuse me.
Through your worship, through the annual report that we bring forward each season, we'll continue to update on initiatives that we work on through each winter season to talk about the effectiveness of it and to bring forward any recommendations to advance those programs if they are applicable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fundera. Other questions? I have some questions related to the $717,000 that's referenced on page 3 and in the main report of savings and cost avoidance. Just so I'm clear in my own mind, when I read the term cost avoidance or the ability to use resources from one area of a department to another, that you're measuring two things. You're measuring the fact that there is a savings you can deploy staff or individuals to another department, and that department that's receiving that also gets a benefit. So is $717,000 capturing both the surplus of staff, if you will, or opportunities from snow removal staff to work in other areas? That's one savings. Does it also capture the fact that there's more resources to the receiving department that would also have savings? Is that in there as well, Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, that cost includes two components. One of them is the avoidance of having to hire contractors to do that work. We are able to deploy winter road maintenance staff instead of hiring a contractor to do that work. And the other portion of that is the cost that would be, I believe, paid to the staff in winter road maintenance now that doesn't have to be paid for those activities done in other areas. I can ask Mr. Kyle to provide additional information if you require.
Mr. Kyle?
So, Your Worship, what Ms. Gazmo said is very correct. Some of it is savings to winter operations and labor, and another large component of it is saving into contracted costs, because our internal cost to provide these services to other departments has been cheaper than the contracted cost for a lot of these services.
Yeah, you anticipate the next question, which is whether is it a general statement that contracted services are more expensive than internal services? Does that relate just to snow removal or to any other service we have that we would contract out, such as in the summertime where we have many road repair crews that are actually in the private sector as well. Ms. Gazmo?
Through your worship, I'm not sure if I can contract on or talk about all contracts. I think generally we see a trend that it is slightly more expensive for contracted services than delivery with in-house crews.
Good, thank you for that. Other questions or comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move on to the committee reports of Board of Police Commissioners. Councilor Murray?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to put forward a motion that we actually consider this report to be tabled to the next council meeting, February 13th, just to give some more time to digest it.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. I'm going to second it for the motion, please. Councilor Bresciani. This is not a debatable motion, it's a referral motion, and as we have with other components of the city budget, they're not considered until we do it in its entirety on February 13th of next year. So they'll give the public a chance to review and look at the police department's budget. It's not debatable, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Finance and Administration. This is the advanced capital projects. Councilor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. I bring forward Finance and Admin 1636, advanced approval for a portion of capital projects and community investment allocations. I need to note that in an election year, budget deliberations are extended because we have a new council on board, and they won't be concluded till the middle of February, which puts some of our capital project work at risk, things like designing tenders, concluding contracts and timelines and community investments to our partners that would be without funds for several months prior to budget approval. So this recommends advance approval in 3 areas. The first is advance approval being requested for $49.4 million for high-priority general capital projects in Appendix A to provide sufficient time to meet project deadlines and completion dates. That would include about 40% of the general capital budget. And $20.2 million for priority 2017 utility capital projects to meet project deadlines and completion dates, and that would include about 30% of the utility capital budget. And $3.6 million to the community investment allocation of the community investment allocation to the Community and Protective Services Committee, so it can exercise its delegated authority to fund approved partner agencies at the beginning of the year, and so therefore to avoid delays in providing budgets to those funding to those partner organizations. And this is the same amount as was approved in 2016, and so we ask for concurrence.
A seconder for that, please. Councilor Hawkins. Councilor Young, could you just, or someone else, I can't do it here, just if you would look at Appendix A, just list on the far left side, it actually saw for this audience and for those in the gallery what some of those projects actually are, like the bridge replacement renewal. If you would mind just going through that very quickly on Appendix A.
I'm trying to find it on my iPad. I think it would be better if the administration did it.
Administration, maybe just go through some of the projects I haven't listed here, but Mr. Ray?
Yes, Your Worship, members of City Council, some examples are the bridge infrastructure renewal, $5.9 million, business transformation program, $3.2 million, civic fleet, $8.2 million, sustainable infrastructure, $250,000, facilities asset management, $5.2 million, and street infrastructure renewal, $18 million. And the residential roads, which is the 1% dedicated, of $7.5 million. Those are some of the larger examples.
Thank you for that. Speakers to the report. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Heard the word bridge. And so by chance, does this happen to be a bridge that we were awarded under the Urban Connector program? not surprising any of you by the question.
I can answer the question for you, just yes, but Ms. Gaisman will give more details.
Through your worship, there's actually 2 bridges identified in this year's program that would have been eligible or could be eligible for UHCP funding.
So just as a follow-up to that, Mr. Mayor, so at this point in time, I'm assuming we don't know from the provincial government if there are any dollars to be handled on this. Is that correct?
Ms. Gaisman?
Through your worship, at this time, we do not.
For the sake of new members of council, the 5.9 this time kind of coincides with the $6 million that we spent last year on bridge renewal. Happened to be the one on Victoria on the Ring Road. This is equivalent to about 3% property tax hike each and every year. The Urban Connector Highway Program was meant to be a joint sharing. We were meant to inherit those bridges that were to be in good condition. These bridges are not in good condition, hence why we are having to spend money on this program now. If I could ask just one more question, if I just see clarity, and this is on the amount of money that Mr. Ray mentioned in regards to roads. So 18 million on, I'll call it regular roads, and then the residential of about 7.5. Is that correct in terms of, that's $25.5 million, am I correct?
Mr. Ray?
Your worship, yes, that's correct.
Would that not put us in a category where that's probably equal to or greater than any amount we've ever spent on roads?
Mr. Ray?
I'm relatively new, but my sense is that's one of our record spends.
So imagine if we had another $6 million, what we could do with it and didn't have to fix the bridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Councilor Young, can you take the chair again, please?
Your worship.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I wanted to talk about the Urban Highway Connector Program to be a bit more pointed than Councilor O'Donnell was, perhaps. I think the cost for the bridge rehabilitation for the Victoria Avenue Ring Road was $10 million, I believe, was it not?
Through you, Deputy Chair, I think it was about 8.8 for 2 bridges. We only did one last year out of the 2.
So I think I hopefully will express the mood and frustration of council, maybe the administration, that we have a program established by the province with no choice. We just simply take it or leave it. They will refurbish a road that is going into the city or town or village, wherever it might be, an urban highway connector. They'll do it to their standards and then turn it over to the city. So we had no choice. We had to say we take it or leave it. And we had some objections to that. That really was a bit unfair, a bit dictatorial. But the program has never been funded properly. And this is just one example of the Victoria Avenue one. There's many other areas around the province where there is this program that is hollow. This is, I guess, a definition of transformational change, perhaps. Not really sure. But we are funding that program on that bridge because it must be done, because it's in danger of I would say, of collapse. It certainly is going to fail at some point in the future. Right? Is that correct, Ms. Gizmo? These are at the end of the lifespan?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, the 2 bridges identified, yes, we would not recommend waiting much beyond this time to repair them.
So we had other bridges along Victoria Avenue, further to the east, that were in trouble a few years ago. And we said we would change the weight restrictions on this until the province actually funded it, and they got a bit upset about that. It's their bridge. It's their responsibility. We have a problem here. And it's not just Regina, it's around the province, where we have a program that, again, you will, as a municipality, will take control over this jurisdiction. We're supposed to help you fund it, but they don't. This is a big problem. This council, this administration, will put public safety first before we have another issue related to danger to the public or someone being hurt. But the issue is not dead by any means. We'll have these further discussions about responsibility and jurisdiction. Thank you. Other speakers to the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Planning Commission Report 141. This is discretionary use application at James Hill Road. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please?
Second for the report. Councilor Prashani.
Thanks. I'm not sure that I've ever brought a one house before you before, but I'm asking you to approve one house. And it's not that special a house. It doesn't have any particular heritage value or anything like that to it.
Perhaps you could tell us why it is so special.
So what happened here was that there was a zoning approval that we gave, and a series of houses of a particular kind went up. But because of the way the road is constructed and the land, they ended up with a little piece of property, and it has enough for one house. The house will conform to the values of the other houses that are along there. So I'm asking you, please, to approve one house.
For one house, please. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to information reports. Executive Committee, the Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Corporation 2016 Semi-Annual Report. Councilor Young.
Your Worship, 1631 Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Corporation. This is their first ever semi-annual report to us. It's for information. The Buffalo Pound Treatment Plant is jointly owned by the cities of Regina and Moose Jaw. And this first report is from the Independent Managing Board of Directors of the Buffalo Pound Corporation, who have the authority to make strategic business decisions on behalf of both cities. The report's an executive summary of board activities, and it includes the strategic plan, major capital expenditures in excess of $1 million, 6-month financial statement, and financial projections against budget, and performance indicators and comparisons to other water treatment plants across Canada. It's noteworthy that the key performance indicators are based on the American Water Works Association and best practices in the National Water and Wastewater Benchmarking Indicators. So it's for information, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor. Seconder for the report, please. Councilor Murray. Discussion on the report. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I want to identify a couple of things. So, separate from this report but related, I represented both this council and the Saskatchewan Municipality Association at a meeting for WACWA. I don't remember what that sounds, but it's all about water in the Upper Capel and so on. Two things I want to point out. One from the report, that is the question that happened, and one about that came out of this meeting. There's a lot of concern on adjacent provinces to invasive species, zebra mussels in particular. I was really happy to find out that our plant, where we have 2 pipes that bring water into the plant, one of them has a flush system on it, so that if the zebra mussels actually congregate there, that they can be flushed out. That's reassuring, but we need to keep diligent about this, because if these creatures can grow, they close the pipe and you just don't draw in water, and of course it kills the pipe and so on. That's one. Second one is about the conveyance. That is the water that comes from Lake Diefenbaker through a channel system to Buffalo Pound. That's called the conveyance. That really was a dirt path for water to come. There's been some work done in the last couple of years where that channel is being dug deeper, and there's been some rocks added so that the sides don't fall in. What I need you to know is that's not pleasing everybody. It is still a concern in terms of how much sediment would be in the water, and therefore if you own a plant, as we do with Moose Jaw, then it would cause significant cost or problems in terms of that purification. So I want you to know that the residents in the area pushed back on that significantly. The other thing that I learned, and I found this the most interesting, was we've done a really good job as a city in terms of water conservation. So despite the fact that our population has grown, the amount of water that we're taking out of Buffalo Pound is not increasing. And so our percentage of use has remained relatively constant. They have factored in new potash plants, that whether it's Yancoal, K+S, and potentially what happens out of Milestone, and they still say that there's lots of water. Where the issue is with water there is the number of people that want to start with irrigation, and that is the big draw in the lake. Probably, if I remember correctly, 48% or 46% of the water is drawn out of their agricultural use. So it's one of those things we have to keep an eye on with one of our core services is to supply water to our residents, And we were reassured by the provincial representative that that's their priority as well, and they're saying there's still a lot of water, but we have a dirt canal to bring it to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Other speakers to the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Communication and motions and notice of motions. We have a communication from the Cathedral Area Community Association on 1915 Metallic Street, former Victoria Campus School site. Motion to receive and file that. Councillor Stevens, seconder, please. Councillor Barshani. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Stevens, you have the floor on your motion.
Thank you. Just bear with me here. It's the first time I'm going to be doing this. So I'm going to read to you motion 16-11. Whereas the site of the former Victoria Campus School at 1915 Metallic is situated in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and whereas the current site includes playground equipment and a dirt field and is already being used by the community as a park, whereas development of park space on this site has the potential to fulfill various objectives of the official community plan, specifically the realization of complete neighborhoods, and whereas the OCP recognizes that parks and recreation space affects Regina citizens' quality of life, therefore be it resolved that the administration provide a report to the Community and Protective Services Committee in the first quarter of 2017 that examines the feasibility of developing this site into a park, and that consideration for a satellite skate park and splash pad is identified in the assessment.
The second for that, please. Councillor Dahl, you want to speak to it?
Absolutely. So the component of the motion here kind of speaks for itself. The space itself is couched right in the middle of a historic residential space in Cathedral. It already is functioning as a park. You'll notice that on one half, on the north end, it was the former site of a school. On the south, there's a sad little corner of that park that is occupied by a swing set and slides in Lucielli Park. And the intention of this motion is really to expand the park space and develop it further. And the attention to the skate park here was deliberate after discussing this with local residents as well as advocates for skateboarding and skateboarding infrastructure, considering its importance and soon-to-be Olympic sport. There's a great deal of evidence in the social justice, health, sport literature to suggest that this is actually a growing and important community public service. And we can also look to other larger municipalities such as Toronto, where skateboarding, quote, is seen as a popular, unstructured, flexible, and adaptable activity with low barriers to participation, and research demonstrates strong links between skateboarding and benefits to personal, community, and economic well-being. This is the motivation behind the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. The speakers to the motion. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the importance, the growing importance of skateboarding, and I appreciate that the city has many recreational demands. First of all, I want to ask the administration a question. Is there a report going on the recreational demands of the city globally going forward? And can you give me any idea when that report will be ready and what the consultation process is with respect to that report?
Mr. Onwright.
Through Your Worship, yes, there is currently there's the Rec Master Plan work being done, online surveys, telephone survey, and consultation with the public. Some of what comes out of this report will definitely provide additional information for the motion that Councillor Stevens has brought forward. We would recommend waiting until the Recreation Master Plan is complete to be able to have all the information available to make a good decision regarding the site that's in question.
Will the Recreational Master Plan consider all range of recreational facilities, including swimming pools, arenas, ice surfaces, all manner of recreational facilities, including tennis and skateboarding, for example?
Through Your Worship, yes, it will.
And do you have any idea when the Recreational Master Plan will be available to Council?
The recreation, through Your Worship, Recreation Master Plan will be brought forward at the end of 2017, I believe.
Thank you very much. Your Worship, I'd like to move a motion, but I'd like to suspend it, allowing other councillors to express an opinion, to refer this motion for consideration by the administration in the preparation of its recreational master plan. I feel that the addition of a skateboard in any particular location involves many questions. What location? Why? How does this fit with other recreational demands on the city? The cost, whether or not the private sector should be involved. All of these are complicated considerations affecting this kind of proposal, and I feel that this kind of proposal should be looked at in the context of the bigger recreational facilities proposal or plan for the city. So I'd like to move that once councillors have had an opportunity to speak.
You serve notice of a motion. Okay, hold that.
Thank you.
Councillor Flagel.
Thanks, and appreciate this motion as well, because I think it is a good idea. The only thing is that about 9 years ago, the Cathedral area didn't want a skateboard park in their area, and that's why it's at Wascana Park. But things change. My question about this is also on the RRI. Is there not talk of a artificial ice surface / skateboard park? Because if there isn't talk about it, there better be, because I've tried to bring it up about 5 or 6 times in proposing that type of a system for having an ice pad in the winter, artificial, and then in the summer, click it over, and it's a nice big skateboard park. The guy developing the RRI actually told me that, nope, there's something right there, and he pointed, but I haven't actually seen it as written down. But
we'll find out. Mr. Onright.
Yes.
What do you know?
Thank you for your answer and anticipation.
Through your worship, the planning work that's currently being done with the RRI, that may be one of the potential concepts coming forward. I'm not aware of what the preferred plan has in terms of recreation.
Okay. So as the recreational studies coming out next year, do we anticipate that we would have something in place in the RRI to look at and compare the study with what's there? Because there's going to be some recreational facilities at the RRI as well, which could envelop the cathedral, the warehouse, Councillor Findura's area, etc. And it may be something that envelops everything. It's like Wascana Park. When the skateboard park was put there, it brought, you go there now, and same with the one on Rochdale, you go to those places in the summer, and they're flourishing with kids, but they come from everywhere. And if we want to continue to build that, is the RRI maybe a better spot than pockets? So,
is that a question to the
Yeah, there was a question in there.
Can you pull that out for us? Can you pull it out for us?
Well, do we know when the RRI and the recreation study, are they going to come out at the same time so we can compare notes? Or are we going to have to make a decision on one, and then all of a sudden the other one comes out, and then we're going to have to change our decision or live with it? Or do we know when they're coming out?
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship. The recreation facility plan, as I'm looking at the one that was approved in 2010 that I was involved in the development of,
yes,
the rec plan obviously will identify the future recreational needs for Regina. So at that point, we'll look at locations. So whether it's the new Taylorfield neighborhood, whether it's the rail yard site, or whether it's just other park spaces that are available throughout the community. So in terms of timing, the rec facility plan will identify the needs, and then I think we look at opportunities for where locations and opportunities will exist. So rec plan first, and the others will follow.
So looking at that thing ahead of time, and through this whole motion thing, is the rec plan going to give us, it'll give us a need, but will it give us pocket needs or large need? What's your anticipation based on 2010?
Mr. Holden?
Through you, Your Worship. So building off the model that existed in the 2010 rec plan, we have citywide facilities, and then we have zone-level facilities, and we have neighborhood facilities. So it'll all depend on what we have today, the condition of what we have today, and what's changed in terms of the wants and needs of residents in the community.
Yeah, speaking to the motion, I like the motion. I think it's a good idea. I think we just got to, there's stepping stones to get to it. So I'll hold judgment for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would like to speak to skateboarding as a lifestyle, culture, and a sport. It's one of those things that breaks down socioeconomic barriers in a way that most other sports cannot do. So I just would like to make that comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Other speakers? Councillor Brashami?
Thank you, Your Worship. As well, just a comment with regards to looking at these kinds of I guess, recreation facilities. One of the questions that I know has come up in the past, and when we're looking at skateboarding, because that's kind of what we're talking about tonight, there is a liability with that. And so I just want to ensure that we are open to those kinds of things that are more dangerous, hockey rinks, all that kind of stuff, because I guess when Councillor Murray, has said that these are kind of sports that sometimes youth find for a reason. So I want to ensure as we're moving forward in our planning, even in the newer areas where we've got huge grass open spaces, that a hill, even for a snow hill, is a wonderful thing. An outdoor skating rink, things like this are really, really important. So I know liability is always an issue with the city, but I really want us to, I hope that we can ensure that that's still on the top priority as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You'll be closing debate, so other speakers to it? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. A couple things, and I would kind of more address this to Councillor Stevens more than anything, and that is one, second on the motion so that we bring these things to the floor and have a discussion. That's one. It would have been my assumption that if this passes, that the administration would come back in the spring and say, by the way, we're doing the master plan review, and this is where it's going to fall, and give us some time. I'd assume that. But the second notion is, and you have every right at budget to speak to any of these things, just as we all do, whether it's our area, your area, anything else. So there's places for this, but for me, I want to follow the process of the master plan review and make sure it comes up, just so you understand.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Before we get to the motion, I would say very quickly, so I just don't keep walking back and forth to Councillor Young. I think there are many requests and limited amounts of resources for us to do this, so the process of the master plan is fine. The request by the administration is to wait and have this as part of the process. Councillor Bryce, if she were here, would say she's been waiting for a long time to get her neighborhood center rebuilt, and her whole area has lost a neighborhood center. I'm not sure which is more important or which is less important. So I'd like to see this as part of the mix to determine whether even skateboard parks is the right mix or something else that would be a greater benefit to your community. So I would like the referral to have a greater picture first. Process is key. Other speakers to the motion before I move it over to, well, now I'll make a judgment call here. Councillor Steve, you can speak, but there will be a motion coming from Councillor Hawkins. So I'll let you speak to close debate because his motion will be a referral motion and no one can speak either. So the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Well, just simply, I brought this forward because there was an identifiable need in this constituency. It was raised frequently, not just in the surrounding and adjacent block, but also throughout Cathedral. And if you look at the space itself in the entire neighborhood, there is a desperate need for a park space. And absolutely, the intention of this motion was to defer to the expertise of the administration to look at the specifics of the development. To be clear, half of that space is currently rubble, and I would suspect it does not fit in within the OCP, and that a green space does speak to that issue. So what I'm asking for here is the actual development of a vacant lot, which we all know in many parts of the city is a problem. This would do nothing but revitalize the space. I am happy to defer the specifics to the Recreation Master Plan. That is sensible, and that is something that we had discussed earlier. I am cautious here, and I'm not supportive of just deferring the entire request for a skate park. This is something that I think administration would recommend its feasibility in this report, and that's what I'm asking. So I'm being very specific with the ask, not just about the skate park, but also the water facility, and that is something that I assume would be brought out in the report back to the committee, and that's what I'm requesting, and that's what I would like to stick with.
Good. Thank you for that. Councillor Hawkins.
Your Worship, having listened to the debate, it's clear to me that the recreational master plan will encompass all manner of recreational possibilities in the city. It's clear that skateboarding is one of those. The details of when, how, where, financing, all of that, I believe, for skateboarding and the whole recreational mix will be dealt with in the recreational master plan report. On that basis, I'd move that we refer this motion to the recreational master plan process.
Okay. This is not a debatable motion, so I'll call the question on it. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have another motion. This is with respect to smoking, vaping in public places. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. On behalf of myself and the others who have signed this motion, including yourself, I would move the following.
We need a seconder for this before you go through that. Seconder? Councillor Barshani.
Whereas the City of Regina has deferred to provincial legislation as it pertains to smoking issues since the Tobacco Control Act was passed in 2015, whereas there has been increased interest in expanding the city's current smoking bylaw to include more outdoor spaces, including restaurant and bar patios, whereas other Saskatchewan communities have updated their bylaws to exceed the restrictions in the Tobacco Control Act, including limitations on vaping and e-cigarettes, whereas council members would like to begin a review of Regina bylaw number 10167 to ensure that it is up to date and reflects community expectations and standards. Therefore be it resolved that the administration prepare public consultation process to be completed by April 1, 2017 to determine the level of public interest in extending bylaw number 10167 to, first, restrict smoking in public places, including restaurant and bar patios, playgrounds, fixed seats or bleachers in public venues, sports field, outdoor concerts, or public gatherings on municipal property, and B, restrict vaping or e-cigarette use in public places, including restaurant and bar patios, playgrounds, fixed seats, or bleachers in public venues, sports field, outdoor concerts, or public gatherings on municipal property. Your Worship, this is a motion to request public consultation in order to bring the smoking bylaw up to date. Before the exact changes that are needed to that bylaw are determined, it seems prudent that the public be consulted on their views with respect to smoking in public places, like bar patios, and on their views with respect to any regulation that might apply to vaping. It has been some time since the smoking bylaw has been updated. Many communities across the country, including those in Saskatoon and other communities in Saskatchewan, have dealt with amendments concerning smoking in public places and more recently the issue of vaping and e-cigarettes. It seems prudent that we now look into this, having consulted the public in Regina. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other speakers? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that there are so many of us that signed on to this motion. It shows that it's an important area that is long overdue. Just to bring some further context to this, I would like to read from the Leader Post, January 2016, which says that 20 health groups, including the Medical Association and the Registered Nurses Association, says that tobacco use and secondhand smoke are responsible for 18% of all the deaths in the province. So people who work in the entertainment industry and who work in bars and patio restaurants are subject to secondhand smoke, not because they wish to be, but because it's part of maintaining their work. And then, of course, there are children's playgrounds and other areas which make eminent sense. But I would also like to mention that 3 health charities call for smoking bans on outdoor restaurants, bars and patios, sport fields and playgrounds and stadiums, and that's the Canadian Cancer Society, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, and the Lung Association. Graded the province's efforts as a D+ last fall. So let's hope that the municipal grade level here will certainly go up if we attend to this. And it's important that we hear from the public, because that's how we know where people stand, and it knows what work we may have to do in order to put something that's usable and workable for everyone into place. I do have an amendment to add, but I'll wait. Would you like me to wait to let people speak to this?
I think you should do it now.
Okay, would you? Okay. This amendment is asking that the administration, in their wisdom, provide council with a summary of peer-reviewed scientific studies of the effects of secondhand smoke from tobacco and vaping, and any other studies that the administration sees as pertinent information for any developing bylaws that will originate from this consultation and public discussion.
Seconder?
Your Worship, I'd second that and accept it as a friendly amendment.
Okay. I think that would be a part of what would happen in any case, but to spot out is good. Okay. So it's a friendly amendment. I think that I would take that as being that it's included in the motion now, and not a vote on an amendment. To be as part of the main motion. Are you finished, Councillor Young? Okay. Councillor Flagel and Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. I think I'm pretty sure I signed on to this, but I remember through the this previous election that the questionnaire came out about all the different things. Do you agree with it? Don't you agree with it? And a lot of my responses were, I do except for, and I do except for. Now, the except for is, everybody's talking about the public. That's great. But we need to make sure, if we're going to go through with this and put this report together, that we talk to the business owners of all of the restaurants, bars, facilities that we are going to affect from an economic standpoint. When the Saskatchewan government brought in the no smoking in the bars, they just slammed it down their throats. January 2004 or 5, these guys are left, they got blindsided. So I don't want to see that happen again if we're going to look at this from a city point of view. What I'd also like clarification on is the province's stand on this, not a Saskatoon, not a Swift Current, not a Yorkton, but the province's stand and their actions going forward, because it's huge. I totally agree with playgrounds, facilities where there's children involved, but adults have better choices and can make choices to move. I get the staff, don't get me wrong, I'm not for smoking. I used to be one. I'm probably the best advocate for smokers, though, because I've been in that situation, and it's not easy. People come in and out all the time, and they're needing that fix. It's no different than if we started picking on the people that eat too much and become a burden to health care, et cetera, et cetera. These people are no different, so why are we not going after them as well? Because they affect our lives every day as well, in some way, or our health costs. So we got to be careful when we start isolating smoker, because why aren't we going after, city-wise, a drunk driver? Why aren't we going after a person that runs a red light all the time? All the time. Why aren't we doing, so we got to be careful, because yes, this smoking affects people, but we also got to watch out for all the other environments. That's a bad exhaust system on a car, drives by a deck, pollutes the deck. Everybody's affected. So we got to be careful. So I'm supporting this to move it forward, just so that we can get some more information first. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. I have a housekeeping issue, then a comment to answer your question. We just changed the rules, as you recall, by clarification from the solicitor, that we need unanimous consent to talk about a motion that comes to the floor without giving a month's notice. I did not do that, and I apologize for that. So I'm going to ask for a vote. It's retroactive. We've been debating. It's for the record. If someone objects to this, we will table the discussion until next month. So I'll ask for someone to move a motion to remove the issue of consent for 1 month. Seconder, Councillor Hawkins. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you for this. I apologize for not getting to that. I should have done that. Councillor Flake, I know a bit about the provincial issue related to smoking, because I talked to the minister, Minister Duggan at the time, and asked them to have a Pan Saskatchewan response to this. The view is simply that they set the standard by legislation. It's up to municipalities themselves to change for local conditions and local requirements. They would not do anything at all. They simply refuse to do it. So that's their position. The new minister may change that, but that's the then minister's response. Councillor Barshani.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple points. I don't want to duplicate or repeat anything that anyone has said, but I do want to, I think we have to know that there are 7 other provinces that are already gone this way, and many municipalities as well, and they've banned the smoking outdoor patios, but as well Saskatoon back in 2004, as it's already been said, but there also is places here in Regina that have already gone this way. They are the leaders here in Regina that have done this. So we've got, Hanlon's, Beer Brothers, many of those that have already gone to this. So I just think that, it's something that we have to strongly look at, and I support for sure moving forward quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other discussions on the motion? I have a question of the administration. The motion speaks to having consultation completed by April 1st of 2017. Is that enough time? Mr. Holden?
Through you, Your Worship. Obviously, realizing that Council wants to have this done prior to patio season, we'll endeavor to do that. Obviously, the motion coming forward tonight, there's quite a bit of consultation that will need to occur. But between our fire and protective services and our communications area, we'll see how far we can get, and we'll definitely bring a report back in April.
Mr. Holden, another question for you, or for anyone in the administration, just the type of consultation that will take place. Maybe this is too premature to say that. Would it be by way of public meetings or surveys? Do we have an idea what that would look like? Mr. Holden?
So through you, Your Worship, I think we'll take that away and look at the most effective way to do that, whether it be some survey work, whether it be some focus groups, whether it be some consultation, and has been indicated that we need to consult with not only the public but business owners as well.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments? I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. That would be unanimous. We'll go to bylaws and related reports. We have executive committee report, the appointment of pest control officers. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. Executive Committee 1632, the appointment of pest control officers. The Pest Control Act requires that these officers be appointed annually by City Council. This recommendation asks for an amendment to Bylaw 2009-71 to appoint the following people as pest control officers under the Pest Control Act from January 1st, 2017 until December 31st, 2017. The officers up for appointment are the same officers by position and title that were officers for 2016. Russell Eric, Manager, Forestry, Pest Control and Horticulture. Ryan Johnson, Supervisor, Pest Control. Corey Doka, Pest Control Officer, and Caitlin Wilner, Entomology Research Analyst. Appointing these officers by bylaw rather than resolution increases transparency of appointments by the City of Regina.
Thank you, Councillor. And a seconder for that, please. Councillor Murray, discussion on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Executive Committee, the 2017-19 golf course fees. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a recommendation to approve the golf course fee schedule set out in Appendix A, and it's based on a pilot project to change the early twilight start times for Murray and Tor Hill to 3 p.m. and a 4 o'clock p.m. early twilight start time for the Joanne Goulet Golf Course. And the third is that the city solicitor prepare a fees bylaw for the fees outlined in this report. It should be noted, Your Worship, that these golf courses operate on a full cost recovery basis.
Thank you, Councillor. And seconder for the report. Councillor Flagel. Discussion on it? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have two bylaws. Councillor Young.
I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaws number 2016-74 and 75 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaws 2016-74 and 75 be read a second time.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Mancinelli, that Council hereby consents bylaws number 2016-74 and 75 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
And I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaws number 2016-74 and 75 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I would just like to say this, of course, is our last council meeting for this year. And I'd like to wish everyone in the audience, at home, and members of council, of course, the very best of the holiday season. Merry Christmas, and have a great 2017. I know Councillor Bryce is not here. She's spending some valuable time with her family. She's not here tonight for that reason, part of her celebration of Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone, and have a wonderful 2017. A motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Flagel, seconder. Okay. Councillor Hawkins, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a Merry Christmas.